Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Pier 25 of the Hudson River Park. I'm Brian Stratton, Director of the New York State Canal Corporation. And on behalf of all of us at the Canal Corporation and the New York Power Authority, it is an incredible honor this morning to join with Governor Hochul, our first gentleman, all of you for this truly historic anniversary, the bicentennial of the opening of the Erie Canal. It was on this very day, 200 years ago, that Governor DeWitt Clinton boarded the Seneca Chief at the commercial slip in Buffalo to begin his inaugural journey to New York Harbor, marking the completion of then the brand new Erie Canal. And we are commemorating also today by welcoming the intrepid crew of the Buffalo Maritime Center and the recreated historic replica Erie Canal boat Seneca Chief, completing a 33-day journey from Buffalo to New York Harbor. This incredible vessel, built by more than 200 community volunteers, and the journey of its 28 stops along the community was underwritten through the generous support of M&T Bank. And with us today is Regional Vice President Tyree Robinson. Thank you, Tyree, and thank you, M&T Bank. Your title is actually President. I'm sorry. Were it not for DeWitt Clinton, we would not be standing here today, nor would Lady Liberty lift her torch beside this harbor. Instead, she might be marking the entrance to the Mississippi in New Orleans or somewhere in the Chesapeake Bay. But rather, these waters, New York Harbor, is the golden door where she lifts her lamp. This right here is the gateway to America. We commemorate this moment in America's greatest city, because the Erie Canal is here, and the Erie Canal is here because of Governor DeWitt Clinton. Today, we are joined by a young American descended from that man and from the idea that by connecting those two worlds, the Atlantic and the Great Lakes, that we are still connected 2 centuries later. DeWitt Eric Silber is a high school student in New Jersey and has competed in academic competitions, including the International Geography Championships in Vienna, Austria, in the International History Olympiad in Rome, Italy. He has participated in the Model UN and holds a black belt in the martial art of Tang Soo Do. Interested in politics, he enjoys analyzing his historical elections with his friends. He is named for his great ×5 grandfather, DeWitt Clinton, and his grandfather, Eric Silber. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome DeWitt Eric Silber. Congratulations. Take it away.
Good morning. I am DeWitt Silber, 5 times great-grandson of DeWitt Clinton, the 6th governor of New York. I am descended from my namesake through my mother, Brooke Silber. My father, Ken Silber, wrote a book about seeing the historical canal in DeWitt's footsteps. New York has a litany of great governors, with DeWitt Clinton among the greatest. But in 1815, at age 46 and not yet having attained the rank of governor, DeWitt Clinton was in an uncertain position. He had been a state legislator, lieutenant governor, U.S. senator, and 3-time mayor of New York. He helped begin public education in New York and established the street grid. But he lost the 1812 presidential race against James Madison while breaking with his own political party. And now the only office he held was a member of a commission looking at the possibility of an Erie Canal, an unpaid job. DeWitt argued the canal was needed to hold the country together, east and west. An imperishable cement of connection, he called it. New Yorkers listened and elected him governor so he could make it happen, which he did as a New York State project when others in power were quick to scoff and mock. The governor of New York is one of the most important and influential figures in all of America. And while I could not be more proud to stand here today as the 5 times great-grandson of Governor DeWitt Clinton, I am just as thrilled on this 200th anniversary of his opening of the Erie Canal in 1825 to introduce a governor who takes seriously the legacy of this great marvel, both as a public official leading the Erie Canal into its 3rd century, but also as a regular traveler on the canal's waterways. DeWitt Clinton would approve. Please welcome the 57th governor of the great state of New York, Kathy Hochul.
Well, thank you. Eric, I'm going to give you some, DeWitt, I'm going to give you some free advice here, DeWitt. Given your family genealogy, you want to run for office, you're in the wrong state. We have a lot of room here in New York, so Mom and Dad, I'm thinking college over here, kind of get used to it. Okay, we can help. Internships, okay. Lieutenant Governor. Why not? Let's get started. So, really, how impressive. Let's give another round of applause to DeWitt. You can say, it's easy to say 5 times, that's 200 years ago. Great-grandfather stood right here. I mean, this is incredible. So, and of course, the water was poured from Lake Erie into the New York Harbor. But before I get started, I wanted to say, you also heard from Brian Stratton. Brian Stratton has been the steward of the Erie Canal for 14 and a half years. He has lived this. He has breathed this. Brian, I've been wearing the swag you gave me years ago. I mean, he's all about the swag. But his passion runs so deep as this harbor, because he believes in the story and the history, but also in the future. So we are in a far, far better place, positioned for this 3rd century because of your tireless efforts. Let's give another round of applause to our canal director, Brian Stratton. Also, you'll be hearing from John Montague. I got to know John back when I was in lower offices in Buffalo, and he had this vision talking about building this replica of the Seneca Chief. He had a lot of people believe in him as well. And this is an extraordinary story, and you would not know this, but I started watching the building of this, was it 2020? 2020, all the way through spring of 24, because it's literally 5 minutes from my house. So when I wanted to take a walk or ride my bike, I was always peeking in the windows of the building where it was literally opened up to the public to share in this experience. This was not done in some warehouse somewhere. It was intentionally done on the Erie Canal Harbor, canal side, so the public could share in this experience as well. So to the 200 craftspeople and dedicated volunteers, I tip my hat to all of you as well. You made the magic happen. Let's give a round of applause to John Montague, the Buffalo Maritime Center. We're hearing from Brian Traziak. executive director, is going to explain how the water happens. Melissa Parker Leonard, our Indigenous historian, is going to help give her perspective, which is really important to us. Thank you for being here, Melissa. And members of my administration, Commissioner of, and CEO of the, and President of the CEO of Empire State Development, Hope Knight, has joined us. Ruth Ann Visnoskas has joined us, Homes and Community Renewal. Our Secretary of State, Walter Mosley, head of Lily Fan, the head of our State Liquor Authority. In case you want to have a drink, I don't know, maybe it's... to my friends in government, and also the co-chair of the Bicentennial Celebration Commission, your very first gentleman, my husband, Bill Hochul. So he went to a lot of meetings, brought home a lot of ideas. But you cannot understate the significance of what occurred 200 years ago. It changed the course of history for our nation, not just this city and this state. And to have the opportunity to welcome this replica here is really incredible. And Governor Clinton himself was the captain. I could have been captain too, just so you know. But my team wouldn't let me take 33 days off of my other job. We have other things like government shutdowns I have to deal with. And by the way, speaking of government shutdown, Brian worked really hard to have the West Point Band replicating the experience of when it happened 200 years ago, but the government shutdown would not allow that to happen. So maybe 100 years from now, they'll figure out how to keep government open, just an aside. But when you think about, DeWitt mentioned the criticism that DeWitt Clinton had for doing this. I mean, even the president trashed him. Now, I understand what that's all about, too. It kind of goes on today. But President Jefferson called it a little short of madness, which I think was pretty extreme back then. I mean, that sounds pretty mild today. Can you imagine what he did then, talked about on social media today? You'd have to plug your ears. It'd be pretty rough. But then the longest canal in the entire country was only 27 miles. This is 363 miles. I mean, how ambitious, how audacious to even dream this. And I always talk about this when I call upon New Yorkers to live this history. This is part of our DNA. And even for people who live in New Jersey, it's part of your DNA as well. But this is our story. So when people say something is too big or too hard or too daunting, no, you look back and say, but what did we do 200 years ago? We had that spirit. We had that ability to say we can find an answer. And we always did. That's what defines New Yorkers, and I'm so proud of that. Now, you heard a little bit about, I'm not a stranger to the Erie Canal. I traveled over 500 miles, which is why I was able to take a pass from some of this journey, because I went to every town. But I didn't have a lot of fanfare. Bill and I would go through locks, sometimes 12, 13-hour days, just the two of us, 32 locks, tornado warnings, I'm not making this up, hail came down, all kinds of weather. So that's one of the reasons I'm so tough. I can handle that. But going through the canals, when the wind is blowing, if you've been in this, and your job, because your husband is steering, your job is to be on the front of the boat, making sure that I don't get blown over, but that the boat doesn't crash into the walls, and the rope is going. The rope is really slimy, by the way. It's slipping and slipping, and I dropped the pole in the water, and we're spinning around. It's like little PTSD from some of them. But what an adventure. And not only did we do the Erie Canal from Buffalo to Albany, we also did the Champlain. We went to the Cayuga, Oswego, or the Cayuga Seneca Canal. Planned on doing the Oswego Canal. Had some delays this summer, but I'm going to get there. So I will have at some point traveled further than your great-great-grandfather, okay? But I'm not quite there. But this gave rise to companies like M&T Bank. I want to thank M&T Bank that started back then, and Key Bank and American Express and Wells Fargo. And it was not just a driver of economic power, but it was a way that people could get together. I mean, you wonder why in 1848, Seneca Falls became the birthplace of the women's rights movement because people could travel to this remote part of our state because of this connection. So it wasn't just the flow of water and commerce, it was the flow of ideas that found their way to these parts of New York State where others had not been able to travel. So the women's rights movement, the Underground Railroad was served by the canal as well. And it inspired such ideas that still exist today. So today it brings drinking water, irrigates farmland, hydroelectric power, $7 billion in economic activity every year, tourism, I mean the bikers along there, Brian, you've done this, the bicyclists, the kayakers, I've kayaked on there, the boaters, and people just want to have a picnic, the little communities along this canal. I think for a long time they were overlooked, but they're jewels in the rough. And we've invested the money into them over a series of years, and they're just shining now. So I really encourage people to take the journey. Even if you don't have a boat, find a way to some of these charming little places that they're so steeped in history. The architecture is still there, the stories are still there, the people are friendly. And so I just want to say, I'm going to continue investing in this. Under my watch, we've had over $140 million invested annually. New York State Power Authority, thank all of our representatives from the Power Authority. Also budgeting an additional $50 million a year the last 2 years for rehabilitation repair. We're going to protect this under our watch. I also want to take this moment to remember some of the impacts the canal had on the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Long before the creation of New York State, the indigenous people were here. They thrived, and many of them lost their lands during the construction of the canal. So it's important as we celebrate this milestone, this bicentennial birthday, it's important we don't forget the impact on the communities, and so we're going to be talking about that as well. And in spirit of that remembrance, the Seneca Chief crew has been planting eastern white pines at stops along the canal. And these are the traditional peace symbols of the Haudenosaunee. And our promise is to honor that past. And I want to thank the crew. The store today will take the water you gathered along the stops and to nourish the final eastern white pine planting. So there's a lot of symbolism here today, which is important. So again, the Erie Canal was more about than just creating a faster way to get to markets 200 years ago. It's about connecting communities, connecting people, and bringing together New Yorkers and others across hundreds of miles and hundreds of years. So I congratulate everyone who's been part of this story, keeping the story alive, passing it on to the next generation. And I'm really proud to be governor at this moment in history, to stand on the shoulders of another governor who is one of the greatest visionaries our state has ever seen. So with that, we'll continue those ambitions, that boldness, that audacity, because that's how I like to live life. And so there'll be no stopping us as we go forward with an optimistic sense of the future, because that's what they had to have when they came up with this vision over two centuries ago. With that, let me introduce Dr. Montague, the Director Emeritus of the Buffalo Maritime Center. Thank you, everybody, for joining this special occasion today.
That's wonderful. You know the canal. I appreciate that. It's exciting to be here right now in this place at this moment at the climax of what's been a remarkable journey. We're enormously grateful to all the hundreds of volunteers over the years who helped build this great vessel, bringing it into being. It's also profound. I'm also profoundly grateful to the ever-expanding community of supporters, enablers, new friends who have so warmly welcomed us at home and across the state. It was our aim in the beginning of this project to commemorate the Erie Canal, to remember and to reflect on its enormous impact in shaping the world we've all inherited. At the same time, these reflections on our shared past have presented us with an occasion and an opportunity to build, restore, and celebrate community with an eye to the future. What started out at the Buffalo Maritime Center as a local outreach serendipitously morphed into a reaching out across the whole state and well beyond. Before the Erie Canal bicentennial began to inch its way over the horizon, it dawned on us that by building an exhaustively researched, authentic replica of DeWitt Clinton's canal boat Seneca Chief, we could create a powerful vehicle for raising awareness and interest in our shared Erie Canal heritage. In keeping with our center's mission, we set out upon this ambitious task to build the vessel with, by, and for the community, with the added proviso that the boat be constructed in full view of the public at the Erie Canal's terminus at Buffalo. We did just that. We were thrilled to draw in hundreds of volunteers, attract literally thousands of visitors, not just from our local community, but from around the nation and around the world. We designed exhibits on the history of the Erie Canal, and a special exhibit on the canal's impact on the Haudenosaunee and indigenous people. We trained and deployed a cadre of docents, delivered innumerable public lectures, set up demonstrations, workshops, developed educational programs for schools, and even published a 2-volume book of original essays about the Erie Canal and its impact. In an effort to cultivate a sense of community ownership for the boat, and the project as a whole, we succeeded beyond our fondest hopes to draw in and engage an enthusiastic, dynamic core of hands-on volunteers, literally coming from all walks of life. This project, this voyage, and these bicentennial events have shown us pathways to common ground and hope for rediscovering community and proceeding forward, a more perfect union. I'm deeply moved to be among you on this historic occasion. May the rest of the journey begin. Thank you, Governor Hochul, Canal Corporation, and all of our supporters, and thank you, New York State. I'd like to introduce Melissa Parker Leonard, who represents a vital piece of this whole history and situation. Thank you.
I am honored to be invited to speak this morning. And at first, I'd like to acknowledge that my family is Tonawanda Seneca, but I speak today as a guest in the homeland of the Lenape. As we close this bicentennial voyage of the Seneca Chief, we stand at a moment of reflection on 200 years of history that is both extraordinary and complex. The Erie Canal was a marvel of achievement, connecting communities and shaping New York State, yet its progress also came at a cost to the land, to the waters, and the indigenous people who were pushed aside after its opening. To hold this full story requires courage and empathy, to see that our history contains both triumph and loss, innovation and destruction, pride and erasure. When we allow those truths to coexist, we begin to heal. This voyage has been about that healing. Communities across New York State have poured water from their part of the canal into this shared vessel, a gesture of unity and shared responsibility. That water will now nourish the final white pine, the Haudenosaunee tree of peace, symbolizing restoration and balance between people, land, past, and future. 200 years ago, my great-great-great-great-grandparents, William and Elizabeth Parker, lived on Tonawanda Seneca territory. Their son, Ely S. Parker, was denied admission to the bar because he was Native, and instead he became an engineer, and he worked on the Erie Canal, a reminder of both exclusion and resilience. I stand here as their 7th-generation descendant, guided by the Haudenosaunee teaching that we must consider how our actions will affect the 7th generation to come, 200 years from now. And as we plant this final tree, we need to ask, what will those who come after us inherit from the choices we make today? I am deeply grateful to the Buffalo Maritime Center and Governor Hochul, and all who have welcomed Indigenous voices into this bicentennial story. To be seen and included in this commemoration is both a reflection of how far we've come and a reminder of how far we must go. May the waters we have gathered and the trees we have planted remind us that remembrance and responsibility must always flow together, and from that truth, we create peace and prosperity. I'd like to introduce Brian Trejak, Executive Director of the Buffalo Maritime Center, for the Gathering of the Waters.
The Gathering of the Waters is a ceremony that has been conducted at each stop along the route of the Erie Canal boat Seneca Chief. This ceremony represents connectivity and renewal during the commemoration of the bicentennial of the Erie Canal, and it acknowledges the complex history of the canal, including the displacement of the Haudenosaunee from the land before the construction of the Erie Canal. Along the voyage, eastern white pine trees were presented and planted at each of the 28 port stops as a tribute to the Haudenosaunee, to the land, and honoring their enduring connection to the land and reinforcing a shared commitment to sustainability. Today in New York City, as the final ladle of water is added to this barrel, it will complete the gathering of the waters from across New York State. The contents from this barrel will be used to water this final tree here at Pier 25 in Hudson River Park, symbolically uniting communities in a powerful act of remembrance, connection, and renewal. The Gathering of the Waters is a ceremony that commemorates the Erie Canal and celebrates community, 200 years to the day that the Erie Canal opened. So now, we are going to take part in the ceremony. All of you are going to be a part of this. And there's going to be some choreography here, so please excuse me for a second. John? We've been joking along the way that this is a funnel that we one day
Well, it's a scientific instrument.
This is the ladle of the bicentennial voyage. So I would ask Governor DeWitt to come on up.
Please remain seated for the gathering of the water.
And Melissa. DeWitt.
Stay seated. Thank you.